So, like, how many gigs did you play with him on that tour?
Um, God, I don't know exactly. I mean, I think we did about a month, and then Fabio, the drummer, Fab broke his hand. I
Was
don't know
that
if you
in
know it.
Scotland? It was in Scotland, wasn't
Yes,
it?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know if you know these kind of stories, but um, yeah, he broke his hand outside a club in Glasgow, and we went. I think it was like a Monday night we played King Tut's. Monday or Tuesday night. I don't know how I remember that. I'm going back to do a tour 25 years almost to the day, and I'm doing Tuts actually because I'm doing a kind of music and book tour in June. Um, but so it wasn't really a club night, and I remember we went to this club and really it was empty, and they were really nice guys, they were nice people, and he was a real sweet guy. Um, but there was some sort of altercation. I think he was something went a bit wrong, and he was upset, and so that happened, and then um, suddenly the next night, wherever we were going, was the whole tour was put on pause, and I think it was probably because we played Edinburgh, then Glasgow, Edinburgh the night before Glasgow, and I think we definitely got them drinking loads of whiskey, and so maybe there was that had something to do with it, and it was such an exciting night. I've met so many people over the years who will say they were at that King Tut's Strokes show, and it was with MHS, Mouldy Peaches, and the Strokes. And the Mouldy Peaches shared our tour bus. And Ad, and Kimya, they kind of dressed as animals. So we had these two sort of furry animals on our bus. Um, and he dressed as Robin Hood, I think. Is that right? Yeah. And the tour started. So if I back up a little bit from when it was put on ice, when this incident happened.
So what happened? Was it in a takeaway or something? I heard him say or something, or was it in the club where he broke his hand?
Yeah, and it just coming out of the pub.
Right, right, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I was standing right there with them. Yeah, I mean,
All
I
right.
saw what
Well, it's some
happened.
kind
Yeah,
of altercation. I don't know.
I not hitting anybody else in that. I think he sort of hit a bin.
Out of frustration.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, out of frustration. There was something that happened. It was nothing to do with them. I think it was there was people with us because we were obviously based in Glasgow. So I think sometimes just something there was something with the bouncer or somebody had said, I don't know what it was, and but it was nothing on their character at all. It was just and but that's what happened, and
yeah.
it was probably they were all over the music press. I mean, they were the hottest band in the world. Um, so for this tour to suddenly come to a halt, so what happened was their merch guy, God, what was his name? Another lovely guy. He was a drummer and obviously knew their set, and their set was really only 35. It was just the first album. It was all quite short,
Yeah.
and so he stepped in, but there was a few days where the tour was on hold and we didn't know what was happening. So we went to North Wales and in the tour bus and had a really nice sort of couple of days because it was June, it was nice weather, and we ended up playing football and these sort of and just having barbecues. Moldy Peaches with us. Don't know if they'd
Yes.
ever kicked a football, but they got involved, and we were just waiting to find out what was happening. And then we did more dates with the replacement drummer, and then we. So when you said how long was it, I can't quite remember because then by the time they were all well again, Fab was back. At the end of that summer, we picked up a few of the shows. I think
Okay.
Liverpool, Sheffield, and by which point I, as MHS plus them had played their first summer, festival. So I remember arriving at like Leeds, Reading, you know, it was exciting for me, but because of the Strokes profile, they were kind of getting moved up the bill everywhere. It was almost like everyone was playing catch up, and they were suddenly on the main stages, and um, we got to like Tea in the Park. Everywhere we went, we were just on the same stop off. This was in the kind of after we'd done the tour, but then the makeup dates were done, after this. So it was quite nice to have that coming together again after the summer. Um, I remember Tea in the Park. Somebody reminded me just recently of this. Nick Valenci was really nervous about the show because they were kind of getting catapulted onto main stages, and he I think it was a really good thing for him to take his mind off it a bit. He was my guitar tech. So
Right.
I remember, I mean, you forget things, but I remember he came on stage with my guitar and I kind of gave him this is Nick from the Strokes, and everyone's such a um but yeah, but back to the beginning of it, the first night was in Brighton, and it just gathered steam, and they arrived in a blue transit van. As I said earlier, I already had done a few tours and had a tour bus, and I can still remember them running on the bus and looking at the bunks, and they were just like wide-eyed, you know, and they within about 2 or 3 nights they had a tour bus, and it it's funny. It started right on the south coast, and then it went all over the UK. As I said, a bit of a Scottish post-Scotland interruption, um, and then we finished. It went all round. I remember Oxford. It came back down England, and we finished at Heaven in London. And by then, if they weren't on all the front pages already, by then they were just. It was like electric, and it was such a privilege um, watching them every night. And I remember that night in Glasgow. I don't know. We were all, all had a few drinks, and we're sort of running along Sucky Hall Street in Glasgow, where Nice and Sleazy's is, where I Jeff and all the, rough trade. So things were all changing really quickly. But um, I remember starting to sing last night to them, and we were sort of falling in amongst, like rubbish bin. We were just having a laugh, and they started singing "I Tried," which was my single at the time to me. So it was just a really, I think it was just a really sort of special time. And then, but I remember we got to Oxford, and I signed my publishing deal that night on the back, the paper, but on the back of one of my mates who'd sort of come on tour with me. And they were there for that as well, and they'd signed, as I said, with the same publisher. And I remember there was like Kate Moss there, and um, I always remember Oxford because obviously I was on before them, and we were side of stage at the Oxford Zodiac. And I mentioned earlier, I don't think I would have found my sound without Radiohead and OK Computer and just things like that. And I was at Oxford. It was probably, I think it was the night before London, so it was kind of towards the end of the tour, and it was just buzzy where you went. Sold out. It was hot tickets, I suppose. I mean, I was just in the middle of it all. I'm looking back now and realizing it was quite a moment, but it was just a lot was happening for me as well. But obviously for them, it was all on a huge level. And side of stage in Oxford, and I remember the dressing room door opening from the outside, or it was like a fire escape, and these guys all come in, and one of them sort of was smaller, and he kind of caught me in the eye and sort of just did a bit of a sort of smile at me, and it was Radiohead. And I remember thinking, God, if I wasn't nervous enough, and so it was quite exciting to know you were going to walk on the stage, that they were there. And then, yeah, just there was something about every night. It was just great to perform, but then to watch them as well, and just it was so exciting. And to be honest, I love Is This It? I love the sound of it, but I think it was even more exciting live. It was more edgy, definitely more edgy. Um, but it was very exciting, and I felt creatively, I just felt I was in the right place, and it was happening, and you were getting to meet a lot of people. I remember having this conversation with Neil Tennant, the Pet Shop Boys, at Heaven at the London club, and um, it was just fun, sort of starting to get to meet some of the people who you really respected as well, you know.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting reading about that gig now. Like people like the Libertines were there. Um,
Yeah, yeah, I've met quite a lot of people. Do you know, I'm making a radio program on islands at the moment, another ball in the air at the moment, but I've been interviewing different people from five different islands, like um, Mull, but also Isle of Wight, you know, looking at the different music scenes. One of them is Eel Pie Island. I don't know if you've heard of Eel Pie, but it's on
yeah,
the
because of
Thames.
mystery jets. Yeah.
I'm just about to say, yeah. So one of them, so I went to meet the Mystery Jets and talked to them. But obviously, Eel Pie was famous in the '60s for the Stones and Bowie as when he was David Jones and you know all that history. Um, and Blaine was telling me that he was about 17 or something at one of the shows, you know. So you know, met the Libertines obviously through Rough Trade, and um, I think I think what happened subsequently with you know Arctic Monkeys, Franz Ferdinand, a lot of these bands that maybe the Strokes were quite a moment for what came next, you know. And of course, we didn't know that at the time, but it doesn't surprise me a lot of these people were at those shows. And also, I remember actually one of my first MHS shows in London to the kind of music industry, if you like. I mean, I knew I was going the rough trade route, but I did do this showcase, and it was just having spent many years trying to get people to come to your gigs. I mean, I must have gone to London with 15 record company people on my guest list at one point. This is before MHS. None of them turned up. But if you can imagine, about 18 months later, suddenly the music industry is in the room, you know, and it wasn't just me. I was sharing a bill with Ed Harcourt. I
Oh,
remember,
another name. Yeah,
yeah, it was an NME sort of showcase night. Again, it was all about that time and probably lucky having the NME behind you and stuff. And I remember I had the shipping forecast, you know, coming from Mull and stuff. I had the shipping forecast as my entry music.
yeah.
And
That's it. Actually.
and I remember, and I used it on a subsequent, on my second album, Us actually. But I remember the door opening of the dressing room and Jarvis Cocker walked in. Now, I'd explained earlier, probably Pulp were my favourite sort of band of that period, you know, or leading up to that, you know, for me. I thought there was something really original about them and still something quite timeless about their music, even now, you know. And and he goes, "Oh, I love the shipping forecast." You know, he's like, "I really, I love the show." You know, and I don't know what he said about the gig, but he loved the shipping forecast, and he was managed by Rough Trade. So the day I signed my record deal, I had Jarvis Cocker and Keris Matthews sitting there, who just happened to be visiting Rough Trade, nothing to do with me, but it was quite a nice moment, you know. So, um, but yeah, back to yeah, there was definitely quite a lot of people coming to these shows. Obviously, people who I respected and knew, but it turns out bands who were, you know, not discovered yet, but must have been influenced by what the Strokes were doing.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's pretty amazing. I mean, obviously, you were doing well in your own right, but to have like a front row seat for that kind of thing, or even a backstage seat for that kind of thing, must be pretty amazing to look back on.
Yeah, yeah, it was. I mean, there's so many stories, really, you know. But if I think about, I think what I really remember is just how electric they sounded. I think you know, they were really hot live by then, and I think because of the sort of rough trade connection, it felt really just like this sort of traveling review or something, you know, like the thing Bob Dylan used to do or something, you know, where you've got this kind of collection of people just traveling around. And there was that kind of hiatus, but then it was really lovely at the end of that summer of 2001 that we did do these extra shows because it was almost like, oh, we get to do it again, you know. And I had about five of my mates come on my tour bus and they all got to know the Strokes really well. You know, they were just very inclusive, you know, um, and then what happened was, so by the next year, I was doing my first New York shows. So I then played 3 nights in New York, and you know, I'd kept in touch with the Strokes, and they they told us where to go. or where to meet them, and it was called the Two A's, sort of Lower East Side Manhattan. And my wife's a New Yorker, so this was all quite exciting for me anyway, because I was getting to go to where she was from, and I was getting to meet her family, and it was just all very exciting. And I remember going to meet the Strokes in their bar, and then um, it was cool just to be on their turf, and they were like, "What are you guys doing here?" It was like, they were like Mull, because they knew about Mull by then, and I don't know if they could have picked it out on a map, but they knew where we were from and where I was from, and they were like, I mean, did you get the ferry here? They were like, they were kind of like, what are you doing here? And then, I mean, I'd said we were coming, but I don't think they quite believed it. And then, but I did get one up on them after all this Strokes business. They were obviously huge CBGB's fans, and they were kind of definitely doing something different, but they were definitely repurposing some of that exciting, and why not? That kind of amazing late 70s new wave post punk. Um, and my first night in New York, I went to CBGB's, but then it was just a kind of rock club, and they were throwing people out. It was, but my wife, being a New Yorker, was able to say, look, there's this Scottish guy. It was end of the night, the people they were trying to get people out of the place, but they were like, all right, and you come. So I was able to go in and have a quick look in CBGB's. It was empty, but it was actually quite good because the lights were on, and the graffiti was everywhere. And anyway, so that was cool. But by the time a week later my shows were on, I'd gone a week early, and the Strokes were like, yeah, we're gonna come, and guess who turned up to my first New York show? Um, just to impress them, I think, David Byrne, Talking Heads.
Wow. Okay.
So, and I was a huge, I mean, I literally had a kind of ghetto blaster on Tom Mor and Mull as a kid, listening to Road to Nowhere and all that, Once in a Lifetime, all that stuff. So I was a huge David Byrne, and who's also Scottish, he was born in Glasgow. So I don't know if he thought it was the real Mull Historical Society and there was some kind of historical talk. I don't know what it was, but no, I did talk to him, and he said, well, I've read about it, and I remember him saying, I was on the website, on the website, and it was really loud. This was before I played actually in the club, so my PR had got me to meet him, which was really, so I knew he was in the room, and I was so busy thinking, are the Strokes here? Do they know he's here? um, and I said, no, what were you on? And he goes, no, I was on, and he's on, and I was on your website. I was on and I saw you were, and I think he'd probably, he was probably quite a student of what's happening. He'd probably read it in NME or something, and he came with his wife. I remember. So, um, so yeah, there was quite a few reasons why I suppose New York and that culture, personal reasons, but also, just being around those bands. It was, and I was always fascinated with New York, and even as a kid, watching anything about New York and hip hop and things like that. So yeah, it was just more kind of child and sweetie shop stuff, But yeah, it was. Sorry, I've probably never talked so much about that tour, but it was. I
Enjoying it,
suppose
yeah.
that's the name of the game here, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And did the Strokes see? Were they aware that David Byrne was there?
I don't know. I don't really remember. I think he might have come a different night because it was a 3 night thing. And I should say I did do my own shows in New York, but it was part of this Scottish, like they have St. Paddy's Day. They were
Right.
trying to do a sort of equivalent in New York, and so it was like a big sort of Scottish government funded push, So, and I suppose I was the kind of new band of Scotland at that time, and I was a lot of coverage, so I was kind of headlining. But there was Scottish comedians, other, like more traditional music, fashion designers. There was so it was in Manhattan, literally looking out the window of this kind of repurposed what do you call it? Like it was almost like an exhibition space, looking at the Statue of Liberty in the distance. I mean, it was, you couldn't have written it, but I think also that probably attracted David Byrne because it was like a Scottish sort of cultural thing, and it was very much a gig. And funnily, the early supporters in the States of my music, maybe I'd been reading some of the British music press were there, and people I know still come to my gigs. So, it was a gig, but it was it was quite an exciting sort of um, cultural kind of collective, and so maybe he was also interested in that. So I think he came the first night. I don't know if they were on the same night, um, but yeah, over the years, I've had interactions with the Strokes, and you know, I suppose for them it must have been quite a seminal moment how much they were embraced in UK, and with the UK label, and so yeah, I mean, I remember most of it, but there's definitely nights I don't remember.
No, it's cool because you can watch. I mean, me and my mates got obsessed with the In Transit documentary they did around that time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it must be cool, like, to look back on that as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's funny because I remember, like, you think about it, this was kind of early days of sort of blogging and things like that, and I remember Rough Trade because they knew I hadn't, I was, they knew I was interested in literature and writing, and I mean, literally on those tour buses, I started writing my first short stories, and, probably 10, 12 years later, my first novel came out, but they actually asked me, would I write a tour diary? And I did, and I mean, I remember kind of going into internet cafes and, as it was then, and blogging away. I mean, it doesn't really exist. I think at one time, I don't know, 10 years ago or 50, I tried to see if but I don't think it really exists, but anymore. Um, but it was, so I was kind of documenting some of it, and, I'm trying to think of some of the other, we did go all around the UK really. And, but it was just really exciting by that time we'd reached London, I suppose, because it just felt like their kind of reputation was gathering steam, and everywhere you went, you felt there was a real kind of air of anticipation, so it's fun. It was fun to be a part of. I probably got stuff in here. Are we doing this in video as well? Or are you,
Yeah, yeah, if that's
yeah.
cool, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I mean, there's bound to be stuff around here that probably would, you know, relate to that time, so,
Yeah,
um,
I did want to mention that amazing piece of memorabilia you've got from with Julian's signature on it.
oh yeah, yeah, I don't have that in this room, but I've got, it was really nice, Rough Trade. I think it was towards the end of that year, yeah, they gave me a kind of signed poster of the Is This It cover. Um, and Julian had sort of signed it for me. And so, yeah, it's just become a kind of ticket stub holder over the years. But yeah, yeah, it's a nice kind of reminder. And I then did start touring with other US bands. About a couple of years after that, I toured with REM and, really nice Southern gentlemen. In fact, I've got, uh, can you see this bottle of wine?
Yeah, yeah.
So this was one of the shows at Brixton Academy, and I remember turning up to an empty, sound check, and we walked in, the place is empty, obviously, and we just started watching them sound checking, and they had a big blackboard with about 100 songs on it because it was their best of tour. It was so Michael Stipe had this kind of blue stuff down his face, and he just stopped the sound check, and he went, "Are you guys Mull?" He just called us Mull, and I went, yeah, and he went, "Hey," and then went back into, whatever it was, and because they were also on Warner, so there was a kind of connection, but they were just so welcoming and encouraging, and but at the end of it, I got this. He came up to me, Michael Stipe, and gave me this bottle of Chateauneuf du Pape, quite an expensive wine, long since drunk, and there's a bit of gaffer tape on it, and he said, "Mull, I wanted to get you Buckfast, but this will have to do. All the best, Michael and REM." I mean, for him even to know what Buckfast was is quite impressive, I thought. But So yeah, so it kind of, I think, I was always like a lot of British, Scottish kids, you were really, you were obviously very influenced by a lot of what came from the States. So it was really kind of from the Strokes onwards, I've really enjoyed um, those type of interactions. But and you also learn, you get to watch these bands every night, and it was just exciting to kind of soak some of that up.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about like, you mentioned yourself that you were, focused on making music, kind of the art of it or whatever. Did you get a bit of an insight into the way Julian worked at all on that tour? Or was it mainly just
Um,
like enjoying the tour?
yeah, mainly enjoyed the tour, but no, we did talk about sort of songwriting. It's funny, I mean, I was a few years older than them, and I can always remember we got to, I think, the lead mill in Sheffield, um, and they came sort of running in, and there was a feature in Q magazine on me at the time, and I'd had a bit of press leading up to them. Obviously, they were not short of press themselves, but I remember that it had my age on it, 20, whatever, I can't remember, and they were obviously a few years younger. And I remember them come running up, and they were, my God, we thought you were younger than, they were like really, I don't know, a baby face or something, I don't know what, but I can always remember their kind of surprise, and and there was kind of interactions like that. And yeah, we did talk about, I think what I talked to him about, I remember because I mentioned earlier about my sort of songwriting approach, and I kind of hear finished songs in my head. You know, there's lots of things I'm a bit of a jack of all trades with. I'll just pick up an instrument and have a go. But I do feel I can hear a kind of finished song in my head, and um, I didn't really know that about myself. Even as a sort of teenager, I used to kind of hear all the instruments. Sometimes it's a bit of an issue because sometimes you want to leave room for experimentation. You don't want to go into the studio and just say, all right, I've got it imprinted here. That's what I'm going to do. You have to. So I've learned to kind of work with that. But the reason I mention that is I remember talking to him about that, to Julian Casablancas, and he kind of went, yeah, right, 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 that to me as if, I felt a wee bit like you could talk in shortcuts, I think, but I think what was really interesting, and I probably didn't appreciate, I mean, appreciated them and their music, but maybe didn't realize it so much. But if I think about it now, his songs were almost like little orchestral pieces. I mean, obviously they were not orchestral music, but you know that he did it in a very minimal way. But if you listen to what he was doing with the bass lines, with the guitar lines, with the drum, with the rhythm elements, that maybe Vampire Weekend and things have gone on to, I think, be quite influenced by as well. He was doing it in a very minimal way. I had choir boys, steel drums, harp players, even that these first American shows, because it was very well funded. This thing, I actually had about a nine-piece band. Can you imagine your first show in New York and having a nine-piece band? You know what I mean? So so I was getting to use all these instruments and hearing all that, but he was doing this. He was doing it with two guitars, bass, and drums. And I thought it was really powerful what he could kind of achieve in that way. And I think there wasn't a wasted note. And um, we talk a wee bit about sort of talking about that. But I think more than anything, it was just having fun, being in the moment, and then what's happening, where we're going next, you know, and who the hell's going to turn up next. I mean, this is just like, this kind of roadshow.